I'm Just Enough from Dirty Horror Podcast, and with me I have Brian from Fandom at Random.
Yes, I am Brian at Random, one half of the Fandom at Random podcast. I have been doing some episodes with Justine on my channel, and I am very glad to be on yours right now.
One of my first guests. I mean, I'm not nervous at all.
No, can't even tell.
We're doing a series right now called Decades of Horror, and we did the first decade, the 70s, on Brian's channel, and now we're going to go through the 80s, which I think arguably is one of the most popular decades of horror. I think everybody loves it.
Yes, I think most horror fans can agree that the 80s are probably going to be, if not their favorite, at least the heaviest in material. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would say it was one of the most substantial, genre-changing, impactful decades.
Yeah.
The first one I wanted to talk about, I think, is also on your list. That's The Shining.
Absolutely. I don't think you can talk about the 80s without The Shining, right?
You can't. I think that this film is one of the most interesting because it's not only adapted from one of the most popular horror books out there and one of the most popular horror novelists, Stephen King, but it's also kind of a controversial film.
Yeah. First of all, I love Stephen King. We've talked about that already. And I think you're right, because not only did a lot of hardcore book fans not like it, but Stephen King himself kind of came out and said he didn't like the adaptation to the movie.
That's correct. And there was also a lot of controversy around how the film was directed and with regards to Shelley Duvall herself.
Yes. Yeah.
And damn near torture.
Yeah. Nothing like that had been done, I think, since The Exorcist with Linda Blair, girl who voiced the demon for Linda Blair.
Right. And Roman Polanski had some issues with Rosemary's Baby as well. I think this was a popular thing to kind of put women through the ringer on horror sets.
Us men don't have a good track record going through the decades of horror, apparently. Yeah.
Apparently. The film itself is a substantial piece of art. One of the biggest standouts is Jack Nicholson's performance as a man going through a mental breakdown.
Right. That's the main star of the movie. Is Jack Nicholson is just amazing in anything he does, but he really brings it home with this movie as, like you said, the slow breaking of his mind and the facial expressions he uses to really, because he doesn't talk that much while we see the real decline.
Right.
A lot of the cinematography and acting from Jack Nicholson really puts it through the screen.
Yeah. And when he does talk, it's chilling. Even his first conversation he has with the person who's hiring him to watch the Overlook, he kind of seems a little crazy. I mean, the way he responds to hearing that this man, his predecessor, murdered his family, and he's just like, well,
well, it happens, you know. I mean, we can just roll with it. So I don't know about you. I read the book before I saw the movie. They kind of hint towards it with the abuse towards Danny and his alcoholism. So they kind of plant the seed as far as a man who's broken or on his way to be broken. And it's subtle in the movie, but if you pay attention, it totally makes sense.
I think the conversation that Shelley has, Shelley Duvall's character has when talking about him, kind of hints to that, about how, you know, they've been working with Danny and how Danny is doing. The way that Wendy kind of portrays and kind of seems very apathetic to the way he was behaving towards Danny, it really kind of shows that domestic abuse kind of mentality. Like, they did a really good job displaying that, I think. For putting her through so much actual abuse on set, I find that very weird. Like,
I know
how well they could show that, but at the same time be perpetrators of it.
It really just kind of shows that what they put her through on set, unfortunately, may have added to the movie at the expense of Shelley Duvall. You know, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think every time I mention The Shining, I acknowledge the abuse that she went through. I think, like, you can acknowledge the abuses, recognize that's not okay.
It's absolutely something that needs to be at least called out while talking about a great movie that a huge crew had a part on that didn't have a part in torturing Shelley Duvall.
The Shining came out in 1980, so it's really kicking off the 80s for us.
Yeah.
I think that a Stephen King work and a classic like The Shining, which I rate is almost a perfect movie. It's not, in my opinion. I prefer Dr. Sleep, what it did to kind of bring us back to the source material.
Yeah.
But I acknowledge the work of art that The Shining is.
Yeah.
What's your next film from the 80s that you
Okay.
want to talk about?
The Evil Dead 1981. Obviously, slash The Evil Dead 2, because I feel like we can't talk about one without talking about the other. The Evil Dead was a masterpiece in its own right. Sam Raimi, his style is unlike any other. You can watch any of his movies and come out with the same feeling. The comedic, terrifying way he goes about filming his movies.
Yeah, exactly. And oh God, the set. Let's talk about like the production of this film. The entire crew suffered to make this movie. This was a passion piece for them. And a few actors who really could care less about the movie, who kind of were just really cold the whole time. Who just wanted to get it done, just struggling up and comers.
I feel like we're running into a running theme here where a good movie, it has a crew that suffered. Actors that suffered. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Shining. I mean, it's sad, but it's true. You're right.
A lot of them put a lot of toil into these films for sure.
The budget Sam Raimi had, and I think the one he did before this, like that underground movie, I forget what it was called, led up to this, and he really perfected it. And I'd argue your favorite movie ever wouldn't have happened without Sam Raimi and the Evil Dead.
That is very true.
Maybe it would have eventually happened, but I feel like Cabin in the Woods heavily takes from Sam Raimi and his style of directing, storytelling, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, can't. I mean, it's called Cabin in the Woods. I mean, what do you think we're referencing here?
Absolutely. It's written on the wall, you know. And then we got the character Ash, which was a franchise all its own, an icon all its own. We got one of the best remakes, in my opinion, later on down the line. And I just can't go through the 80s without mentioning The Evil Dead.
I think you can't talk about horror at all without mentioning The Evil Dead. This is a beloved franchise. People who love horror love these films. Even if you don't necessarily look at The Evil Dead and think, wow, this is the best movie ever made, you're not going to think that. You understand where it came from. You really enjoy the campiness of it. This is kind of like unintentional B horror, but with so much respect and love behind it that people don't consider this like a B horror film. But really, it's kind of the king of B horror. That it started that. It started the campiness, the people just wanting to make a project because they wanted to with whatever they could. I mean, there's a really like gross moment in the film. It might have been Evil Dead 2 actually, where he's wearing this mask and he's just pouring sweat out of it because he had to wear it for so long. And if he wasn't sweating his ass off wearing these prosthetics, they were freezing their asses off.
It was one or the other, one extreme or the other extreme. But you're right. He's a master of B horror to the point where I hate using the word elevated, but he elevated B horror to roll with the big guns, you know?
Yeah, I think successful B horror requires something more than just being ridiculous, because you can get that. You get like, you know, the Sharknadoes, Velocipastors. Those are B films that have not a lot going for them outside of being so ridiculous that they've become a meme. But with Evil Dead, you have more than that. You have a fantastic character. You have a fantastic actor to really carry that character. Speaking of Bruce Campbell and Ash, of course.
Right.
And you have a story that is so cool and still can be so freaky and exploitative. It takes a lot more to make something be a successful B horror, something that becomes a cult classic. There has to be that magic.
I kind of respect it a little more than, you know, A horror, I guess we could call it, because there is such a fine balance you have to find in order to achieve what Sam Raimi achieved. And that one wrong move can really tilt that scale to Sharknado Velocipaster level or Drag Me to Hell Evil Dead Cabin Woods level. You know what I mean? So there really is a huge balance act going on there. And Sam Raimi, I would argue, is king in that area. Yeah.
Absolutely. He is.
Yep.
He's at the forefront of making something. And he did it with the Spider-Man films too, where some
Yeah.
of these things are things that you should not be able to pull off, but he managed to pull off quite well. I mean, nobody expected the Green Goblin to translate well onto screen.
No.
So he can picture things in a way that he understands, I think, really well the audience. He
Yes.
trusts his audience so much to receive his vision, regardless of how ridiculous it sounds or impossible people might think it might be. He manages to put out something that we all can really like cling to and enjoy.
Definitely.
And I think that the Evil Deads definitely did that. And I mean, all the way up, Evil Dead 2, how brilliant to do a remake of your own film and just fully lean into what your reception was on the first film. You know, the first one wasn't intentionally funny. I mean, but Evil Dead 2 was.
It was. He saw what worked, and he does it in every movie. He sees what worked from his previous works and then really leans into it just enough to get that audience reaction, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so perfect. The guy, Sam Raimi's one of my favorite directors, and Evil Dead is what started it all. I love Drag Me to Hell. I love the first two Spider-Man movies. We don't talk about the third one, but the first two were amazing. So I love all the shit he does. Yeah.
Me too. I'm always excited for more from Sam Raimi. We're still in 1981. I want to talk about the next campy cult following film that I think a lot of us, just about everybody, finds to be the best in its arena. And
Let's hear it.
An American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that doesn't say An American Werewolf in London when you ask them, what's your favorite werewolf movie?
Right. Although
the top.
It really is right at the top. Although, like, I've been hearing this one called Dog Soldiers thrown around a lot. I haven't seen
Dog Soldiers.
I haven't seen it. I can't find it anywhere. But anyway,
it's not available anywhere right now. I've been rewatching all of the werewolf movies and I can't find it either.
Yeah, so I can't find it. So as of right now, Werewolf in London lands at the top for me.
Yeah, An American Werewolf in London is my favorite.
Right.
Ginger Snaps is the closest. I really like Ginger Snaps.
Believe it or not,
The Howling is fantastic as well.
The Howling would probably be my favorite, but believe it or not, I haven't seen Ginger Snaps up until 2 months ago. Watched it my first time. American Werewolf in London, I have to admit, I think the last time I saw this movie was I must have been 13. It's been a long time.
A long time.
I have to rewatch it.
I just rewatched it like a few days ago because we're going to be doing Werewolf on Wednesday when we film the next episode of the Let Us In podcast. So,
nice. But isn't that the best part of podcasting? When you come up with a topic, it gives you a mission to watch movies instead of sitting there
so much easier to find something
flipping through all the streaming channels trying to find something what you want to watch.
So An American Werewolf in London, I think John Landis managed to come up with a film that was not just scary but funny. Like, it was funny, and I find this film to be really sexy too, and I don't think a lot of people address this enough, but it is sexy. David Notting is a good looking dude with a lot of charisma. He gets it on with a nurse, like, there's great music and chemistry. Like, it's a very sexy movie in my opinion.
I don't disagree with you.
Corpses aside.
Seriously, normally vampire movies can be sexy, right? Without a doubt, they're almost always sexy most of the time. Werewolf movies, you have hair, you have body odor, you have claws. It doesn't get sexy. It's a feat to take a werewolf movie and make it sexy.
Cursed might have delved into that a little bit with like a pheromone thing, like they were acting like, oh, there's something about you. They do not do that in American Werewolf in London whatsoever. Him just alone as a person is just he's got swag. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, he's goofy. He's like the class clown that's good looking.
I was gonna say he's like that lanky kid that really has a personality that can just project his swagger.
I've always listed this as one of my like Netflix and chill movies because I think it's so perfect for that. Plus, it's like a good time, and the practical effects are just I mean, this is what makes werewolf movies so difficult is
Yeah.
the transformation scenes are very important, also hit or miss. You get some that are overly like coded in CGI. You get some that are just like, what is that? Is that supposed
Yeah.
to be a werewolf?
I mean, sometimes you get
What?
werewolves flipping people off, like in The Cursed, No,
Yeah.
transformation scenes are so important. One that comes to mind is Silver Bullet by Stephen King. That's one that always stood out to me. The Howling, obviously, but
Howling.
this
Oh,
one,
it's so good in the Howling too.
yeah, this one is number one, I think, as far as it
I
goes.
agree. And
Yeah.
the talking corpse like special effects also like do not get enough credit. The special
No.
effects just on those alone are so incredible and how fun. They're like so silly. They're not even scary. They're goofy, but they have
No.
scary moments. They do.
Yeah,
But
it's almost Sam
they're
Raimi-esque,
funny. It's
kind
just
of, I guess you
funny.
could say. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
You know?
totally. They totally get like this dead-eyed look sometimes. And
Yep.
yeah. Oh yeah.
It brings up a bigger point about the 80s. Since we're talking decades in horror, this is
Yeah.
where special effects really took off. And we're
Yeah,
talking
really
practical
innovative.
effects, because we're talking 80s practical effects, 90s kind of dipped into CGI, and then it took off from there.
Yeah, the 80s with the effects, but like this is where I think camp took on like a whole new meaning. Like
Yes.
there was no holds barred in the 80s when it came to storyline, what they decided they wanted to do. It was the silliest, like
they were
time of
wilding out.
horror.
Yeah, they were really wilding out.
And oh man, I actually really want to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street next. I mean, how can you not when you talk about really kind of going out there and silly and like how can you not talk about Freddy Krueger?
I mean, you know that I have a certain favorite horror movie that we'll talk about, but my favorite franchise will always be Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes.
I love it to death. Literally,
So,
I love it.
Nightmare on Elm Street was probably the second franchise I was ever introduced to. The first one being Child's Play, which scared the living crap out of me. I was 4 years old the first time I saw it. It was the first horror movie I ever saw. And then right after that, I was introduced to A Nightmare on Elm Street. So Freddy Krueger and Chucky were the two most terrifying things on the planet, in my opinion. So nothing was more scary to me than Freddy Krueger because you were never safe. Like you have to sleep. You're
Absolutely.
so vulnerable in your sleep.
It kind of happened opposite for me, right? Nightmare on Elm Street was what I was introduced to at like 5, and then Child's Play when I was like 8. So Nightmare on Elm Street lives in my head rent free all the time. Nightmare on Elm Street 2, this might be a surprise to people, but on my list, I put Nightmare on Elm Street /2 because they're tied. They're tied for number 1 for me. Nightmare on Elm Street 2 got a lot of hate when it first came out, but I digress. I talk to a lot of horror fans about how serial killers and Halloween and things like that are scarier because they're real. To me, you have a little control over real situation, right?
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel. I completely disagree with people on that. They're like, home invasion is so scary because
it's like, no, I own a gun, so I'm good.
I can control myself in like home invasion scenarios, right?
At least I have a chance, but in my dreams, I don't have a motherfucking chance again. I'm sorry, I keep swearing. I have a dirty mouth.
It's fine. This is called dirty horror.
Yeah, I know, right? But I don't have a chance against Freddy Krueger. Nancy only has a chance. Me, I would bitch out. I would freak out. I would panic. Sleep is the thing that scares me the most.
Gotta sleep. And I love sleep. Like, oh, how are you gonna make that scary?
If you're gonna interrupt my sleep, not only interrupt it, but like try and kill me while I'm sleeping, I'm gonna be pissed.
Yeah, so Dream Warriors was my favorite because I was so scared of the first 2 entries as a child that I could not watch them. I could only watch Dream Warriors because they won.
Yeah.
And it was like okay. It's okay because it ended like on a high note, like a good
right.
note.
Yep. It's like a team of it's like the Avengers finishing off an enemy, except in horror, you know. And Dream Warriors is a very close second to number 2 for me. So I'm loving that we're talking about all 3 because they're just,
you can't not. I mean, the kills in Dream Warriors are also my favorite. Like my top Freddy kills, I think my top 2 live in Dream Warriors.
Yeah.
And my number 1 kill being the puppeting of the
marionette
veins all the way out the window. Makes my skin crawl every
It
time.
freaks me out. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can
it's
agree
so
that the
good.
kills in 3 stepped up a level, and the scariness of Freddy in 2 was really what sells me on it, because
Yeah,
he's slimy, he's gross, he's dark still. And then 3,
yeah.
they introduced the comedy and again found the right
Welcome to prime
balance.
time,
Yeah.
bitch. Yeah, that's my
Welcome to
second
prime time,
favorite
bitch.
kill.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's so, and I think effectively all the way up till Dream Child and Freddy's Dead, we have one of the best franchises. New
Yeah.
Nightmare was amazing.
Yeah.
And then the remake is just, yeah.
What are you talking about? What remake? The
Oh,
remake that will not be
nothing.
made.
Sorry, I was having a flashback. I must have,
This
kind
could be
of
like the
dipped into
Voldemort
reality.
of
Yeah.
horror.
Yeah. No, but always and forever as a franchise, Nightmare on Elm Street. But let's talk about some of the shit Wes Craven did that really separated it. Johnny Depp's kill. I mean, he saw something in Johnny Depp, first of all,
Right.
and he became a huge star. And the scene where they filmed the death of Johnny Depp almost killed people, but ended up being one of the best scenes in the movie.
Yeah, I think again, we're talking about how horror is the innovator of film. We don't
Yeah.
see stuff like this come from other genres. It all starts in horror. You think that space movies got the idea to spin a room around upside down for their own, like without Wes Craven being the one who did it in Nightmare on Elm Street?
With people
Like-
strapped in chairs with seatbelts in like water, electrocuting everybody. Like they suffered, so films
Yeah.
later on could survive and use this
They
trick.
did it because they had to. And the
Yeah.
horror genre always is innovating because it has to. And it's
Yes.
so strange. And I hate everybody who doesn't acknowledge that. I really do.
Right. Yeah, I
Passion.
completely
How
agree
dare
with
you
you.
disrespect the best genre in film? I
Yep.
mean, without it, it's like NASA. Without space exploration, we wouldn't have microwaves. You know what I mean? Things like that. Like
Absolutely. Yep.
they're taking
You're
risks
right.
and they're doing things and innovating for the entire film industry. And I think Wes Craven and John Carpenter were like the
They
biggest
were
ones.
the perfect people to take what they had, think outside the box, figure out what they could do with what they had, and not only that, but execute it perfectly in the editing room.
Right. And knowing like what to look for, how they had a vision for something. And you think of some of these special effects and they would not accept mediocre. They were constantly trying to find the right look or feel. I mean, just with Freddy Krueger's skin, like how much pain and time that he went through different iterations over and over again, and then found inspiration from a pizza. Like
Yeah.
and then he finally understood how to execute it. And it's like his gears were just constantly turning for this idea that he had and how to execute it, that he would settle for nothing but exactly what he wanted. And he just kept at it. And I think that speaks to these creators.
I could talk about Wes Craven forever, because honestly, I think when it boils down to it, he's my favorite horror director, I believe, because he was always looking for a deeper meaning in a horror movie than most people were. I just respect him so much for the work he's done. What he did with Nightmare on Elm Street and Sleep, and he did for Sleep what Jaws did for the water.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God. Yeah. I've never even thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. I don't know if anybody has ever come close to creating an icon like Freddy Krueger ever. There isn't another one out there. I think like maybe you get close with Chucky because he's also charismatic and
maybe, yeah.
But it's still not as imposing.
We haven't given credit a lot to Robert Englund, who came up with the Wild West leaning shoulder, the mentality of Freddy. He really brought it to that character. And if you haven't seen Never Sleep Again, the documentary, it's a 4-hour documentary, one of the best I've seen. If you've liked Nightmare on Elm Street like me, you learn so much, and it's just amazing. The way he talks about how the glove was heavy, so he always leaned his arm down like that, and that gave it that perfect silhouette.
Kind of like he was kind of cool,
like a Wild West gunner. And that's what he always compares it to. When I heard him say that, I was like, holy shit, I got goosebumps. I don't know. The Nightmare on Elm Street franchise,
in their minds, like what they were thinking and how they like how some of this translated. And I always get on myself about this because sometimes I think a little, I think a little too deeply sometimes about works. Like I draw a little too many conclusions and meanings, and I try to like really get into the minds of these creators to understand what they were trying to like say or do.
Right. I do the
I
same
like
thing.
I do that and I'm like, okay, I don't think they were that serious. Like,
Yeah.
But then you listen to them and you're like, well, maybe they are. I mean, some of them I think really
the greats are the greats because that's the depth they go to for their character.
We have a lot of directors, I think now we're seeing a resurgence in horror, and I don't want to call it elevated horror. I would just say this is a horror renaissance that we're going through.
Yeah.
Where we have real amazing artists coming out and really paying attention to things of the past and trying to do good for the horror genre instead of the commercialized kind of reboot requel thing that's going on, which I don't have a problem with either. I'm actually kind of a remake stan. I don't mind them at all.
I'm all for remakes, but you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just talking about Robert Eggers today, and then we're talking about Ty West. We just talked about X. You just talked about X.
Mike Flanagan,
and then Mike Flanagan and Jordan Peele, all of them. You know, they really do. They're breathing a new life into horror, and it's just an amazing time to be a horror fan.
It is, and I can't wait to be talking about them when I'm like 60, looking back at them like they're like the Wes Cravens and stuff.
I can't wait for those hearing days. About them in the new days, you know.
Do you remember when A24, man, they were innovating?
Oh my God. It's going to be crazy, right?
Yeah. I look forward to it. I can't wait to be on that journey with them.
Me too. Absolutely. They're going to be the classics when we're older.
Exactly. I want to really touch on Tobe Hooper again, because here we are in the 80s.
Yeah.
And he's still at it, still making things scary that you wouldn't think should be scary. But man, here he is with Poltergeist in 1982.
Yeah.
Making a child, a TV, and a play clown.
Oh, yeah. We talked about this in the past episode on my channel, and I'm glad we get to bring it up now. Poltergeist, toy clowns, TVs, little girls. I mean,
they're here.
They're here. Come to the light, Caroline.
Oh my God.
I remember I didn't even see the movie until I was teenage years, but I remember seeing clips when I was younger, and I was scared of. So for all you youngins out there, static on TV was a common thing late at night.
Very common.
You know?
Yeah. I'd wake up in the middle of the night falling asleep on the couch all the time to just static.
If I did that, no, I was running
terrified
straight to my room or my mother's room and saying, no, I am going right to bed with you. Yeah. He just, and PG, mind you, rated PG this movie was. So
if you ever saw a tree scraping against a window at night during a storm, I'd always think of that tree coming through and just like snatching him up out of bed. Poltergeist was one of those movies that my family didn't realize I was too young to watch because they hadn't seen it yet.
Yeah.
So it was like when we all discovered together was scarier than we expected.
Yeah.
And cannot be like reproduced. I mean, the remake not, it didn't capture what the original captured.
No. And there's a reoccurring theme, right? CGI. It's when you use heavy CGI in a remake where the original was done with practical effects, it doesn't work.
Or real skeletons.
In
the pool
buried in the graveyard that you built over.
Right. Fun fact, the skeletons in the kind of dug up muddy pool scene were real. Those were real skeletons, and the actors didn't know. Here we are torturing actors again.
I know, right? Yeah.
They were swimming in muck with real skeletons.
What started the whole curse of Poltergeist and the actress that played the little girl, but she ended up dying from some super rare disease. And then a bunch of crew members, me and my podcast did a topic on cursed movies, and the shit that lines up with this movie is pretty creepy.
Heather O'Rourke,
right?
Was
yes,
the little girl's name who played Carol Ann. Yeah, I'm not a superstitious person, but I do believe you should probably let people know when they're about to be playing with bodies,
Yeah.
no matter how decomposed of a state they are. Some people are very religious and superstitious and probably would not have opted in for that.
No.
But you know,
Nope.
they had to make it happen, right? They wanted it to be as real as possible, damned or not.
Absolutely.
The film is amazing. It is so scary to me. I think
Yeah.
that where they did do some CGI is the only things that I think could be left out. You know, if we were to remake or refine this film, the like
Yeah.
hands, the electricity hand things
Yep.
from the Poltergeist, that's the only thing that doesn't really hold up today. I think everything else is, you know, mainly practical effects, which is why the 80s and the 70s and some of these great films are talked about still.
Hell yeah.
They hold up.
And like, yeah, like you said, in a remake or a requel, I guess we could say, if they stray from that, stick to simplistic effects, they could really hit it out of the park. But I mean, again, striking lightning twice like Toby Hooper with Texas Chainsaw, Poltergeist, and many others is hard. So
yeah, he's also, I think, really up there with Wes Craven and John Carpenter as far as filmmakers who really did something for horror, who really
and
impacted horror in a way that not a lot of people can do.
And often underlooked, but respected.
Dropped John Carpenter's name quite a lot.
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard
right
not to, yeah.
that we talk about The Thing,
The Thing.
is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's like my third favorite film of all time.
It's definitely in my top 10, sometimes my top 5, depending on what I'm doing. It's hard to not put that in your top list for sure.
Another one with practical effects that stand the test of time. I consider The Thing to be a perfect movie. I have not really any complaints about it whatsoever. I think some of the choices that this film made were genre changing. The way that he built tension, but also kind of gave you a hint right out the gate that something was amiss, just really slaps you in the face with it, with the dog being chased and shot at, you know, like you're just like, oh my God, something's wrong. Like nobody wants to kill dogs.
Nothing good is happening right now. Nothing.
Right.
And then the setting again was creepy as hell too. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing more desolate than Antarctica would be space or being completely underwater.
And by then we've kind of had both. So there was only one way to go, Antarctica.
He built a great cast again.
Yes.
Great cast. You have, you know, Kurt Russell, Keith David, Wilford Brimley. These guys are like creating these characters that you really like. They're likable characters. You fall in love with this group. They're all very diverse people as far as like their personalities go. And you quickly learn that you're not supposed to trust them. How, as an audience member, you go from loving everyone to wanting to murder them all in your own mind. You're like, no, he's bad. Kill him. Kill him. Don't trust him. I think he's bad. Like you're thinking these things as you're watching this film. That's just genius.
And one of the things we'll be talking about in the next episode is whodunits, right? Because of course, whodunits is one of the biggest things. This kind of is a spin on the whodunit subgenre, no?
Oh, totally. This is like whodunit meets Lovecraft.
Yeah, and it's perfect. And he executed it perfectly.
Yes. Oh, yes. The practical effects just were terrifying.
I honestly, if I had to say a movie is number one for practical effects alone, I think The Thing would be it.
I would agree with you. 100%. The Thing and Alien were two of the like fathers of special effects. Like the way that they used them and did not settle for, again, any mistakes. Like,
no,
be damned. Like,
so
they had a vision and executed it perfectly.
Interesting point right here, right? I'm going to be talking about a movie later that has a special effects guy involved in directing the movie. He was involved in The Thing because Rob Bottin was so overworked and exhausted that they needed somebody else to come in because of how much of a perfectionist he was, right?
Yeah.
Now, the guy who came in, I can't wait to talk about him because he is so big and so overlooked that people don't even realize it. But that speaks to the level of work that Rob Bottin did in order to make The Thing what it is.
Yeah. You know? I mean, I have like a couple of favorite scenes from The Thing that just, again, live in my head rent free. One being the defibrillator scene, which There's that word again that haunts me and all over.
Defibrillator.
Yeah, the defibrillator.
Yeah, well, you nailed it the first time, so you're
I
good
know,
now.
but now we're just playing with it too much.
Now from here on out, I'm just gonna be like the defibrillator, the defibrillator. Yeah.
Right. One of the scariest scenes. I mean, because you just really didn't see it coming. I mean,
No.
I will say, like, there's the blood test scene where like he electrocutes it and it goes blah, and it, like, comes out of the sure, scary, but it's like in the palm of his hand. The defibrillators.
Good.
The
Defibrillator. Yep.
Defibrillator scene really was just shocking and so cool. It
Shocking.
just like
being a pun, absolutely. It was shocking and boom.
Yes.
Yeah. That one and just the double head scene, everything about it, really, every practical effects in that movie really hit home. But the defibrillator scene
in the kennel scene where it's just like really just gross.
Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you what, I don't like humans as much as I like animals, and I can't stand animal scenes, but that one I respected a little too much. I'm like, all right, I can deal with it.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm the same way. I don't like watching dogs die, but there's something that's much more disconnected about a creature that it feels like you're not watching a dog die because it's not a dog, it's the thing, you know?
Yes.
So it's a little easier to disconnect from that. But I tell you, I screamed so much for them to like get the other dogs out of there.
Yeah.
Get those dogs out of there. What are you doing?
Let them free right now.
Release the hounds. Like, yeah. And then there's the spider head, which, you know, reprised its role in the It remake.
Yeah.
Everybody loves that.
With the perfect what the fuck line with it, you know, it really was. The Thing was perfect practical effects. I honestly think that. Yeah.
I do too. There's movies to this day that are trying to capture the coolness that those effects captured. Movies like The Void, which I highly recommend.
You literally read my mind. I was just gonna be like, the void, you know.
If you
when we
love
first
the
see that creature
effects.
with the tendrils.
Oh my God. They did so good with those ones too. And they honestly are doing practical effects because of this movie. Like,
yes,
you can't deny that. Like,
when horror fans make horror movies, they say, well, look at The Thing. Look at these movies. They did practical effects. That's what's scary.
That's why these movies stand up today. I mean, I know a lot of people that had not watched The Thing until very recently, and they're still like, holy cow, that movie was scary. It was so good. Everything looks so cool. Like,
it holds up.
You don't get that a lot.
And then we end it with Kurt Russell and the flamethrower, and it's just all around an amazing badass movie.
You don't know.
And I forget, was the remake a prequel or a sequel? I can't even.
It was a prequel.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Not really a remake, more of a prequel.
At least when they shit the bed on that one, it wasn't a continuance of a movie, but a trying to kick off point. Yeah.
You know, and I don't hate the prequel. I actually really enjoy it. And it's partly because I love Mary Elizabeth Winstead a lot. I love the actors in that film. I think everything was great. And from what I understand, they used a lot of practical effects and then covered it up with CGI.
Yeah.
So I would love to see the un-CGI'd version to see if it exists.
Would be great.
How cool would it be if they like re-released it and like took all the CGI off or like at least upgraded it maybe?
One of these days.
Better, like how good it would be, because beyond that, it's a great movie.
Like, yeah, you're right. A lot of the hate was a CGI.
Father of practical effects, The Thing, the daddy of practical effects. You're going to do a prequel and use CGI? The blasphemy.
You don't even have to be a horror fan to be like, all right, that's a bad idea. Yeah, no, that was a bad call from the get. So I am on board with you.
They did the same thing with Curse. The studio got involved.
I'm still waiting for the Craven. I'm still waiting for the Craven cut. I'm still waiting for it.
Where is it?
It's coming. I still have faith in my heart that it's coming. But the thing is, you can't talk about the 80s without The Thing. This is a really good segue.
Perfect.
And this is one I need to mention because it's my favorite horror movie of all time. You know, it has a special place in my heart. Pumpkinhead. Pumpkinhead is so underrated. I know a lot of horror fanatics do like it, but it's never on the top of people's list, and I will
You're the
never
only one I
understand
know.
why.
You're the
It's
only
so
one.
good.
I love this movie. So I am with you on that. It's a fantastic, highly underrated film with one of the coolest creature designs ever. I need to do a top 13 on creature designs because I think that the Pumpkinhead design deserves its shine. It is
Yes.
so cool. In fact, the newborn in Alien Resurrection, I think looks very eerily similar.
I didn't even think of that. You're right. It does look a lot similar. And you know what's funny is the guy who designed Pumpkinhead, guy who
Yeah.
directed Pumpkinhead, he had work on Terminator 1, Terminator 2, Alien, Aliens, Jurassic Park 1, 2, and 3, and basically
Predator,
anything
right?
that has and Predator 1 and 2,
Yeah.
anything that has a great creature design, this dude had a part of.
Now, correct me if
And
I'm wrong. He was actually part of this as a passion project, correct? Like to come up with
yes.
something new that he'd never done before.
Yeah, I believe you're right, where this was his magnum opus. I guess you could say,
Okay.
like, this was his movie where he wanted to take special effects, story, and his direction and really integrate everything.
It's such a cool
And
story too. Like
it is. And
very different.
a lot of people don't give it credit for that, because let's talk about the 80s, right? We got a lot of rehashes. We got camp slashers, we got babysitter slashers, we got
Mhm.
sci-fi thrillers slash horrors. We got a lot of rehashes from a
The
lot
80s
of
were full
movies.
of slashers. Yeah.
Pumpkinhead had not only the father-son dynamic, which was a little
Mhm.
different than back in the days. You know, they weren't looking to show boobies. They weren't looking to show a bunch of teens getting murdered at camp. Nothing like
Right.
that. This was like an emotional, deep story. Maybe because
Mhm.
like I had a bias where, I don't know, I was a troublemaker, grew up without a dad, whatever. But it connected with me.
Yeah.
And then we get a villain in Pumpkinhead, where, in
Right.
my opinion, best creature design ever,
So cool.
except maybe Jaws. And that's easy because that's a shark.
Greatest
You
creature
know?
design, except for maybe the shark. The shark's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
except for the shark. And that's because of the way Spielberg used him. But
Yes.
when you think of a demon of vengeance, that's what I would think of. That's what I would picture right
I
there.
feel like the Pumpkinhead design is very like it epitomizes the 80s design and aesthetic because
It
it's
does.
slimy, it's like flesh toned,
Yep. And
it's very like fleshy. I don't know how to explain it. It's fleshy.
you're right. No, and you would think a demon from hell, resurrected from hell, right, would look like they had the flesh torn off them
Hard
or
or
something like
something.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I don't know, but
And not only that, but the
fleshy.
person who summons Pumpkinhead turns into Pumpkinhead, and Pumpkinhead turns into the summoner. They're connected, they're bonded.
It's the coolest. I love
It's a
that.
deep movie that people don't really understand is really deep.
Hmm.
And the characters weren't terrible. I'm not going to
Tell
say
us,
they were the
Brian.
best, but they were likable characters, and they're characters you couldn't wait to see die, which to me
Yeah.
is a perfect balance, you
That
know?
is the perfect balance. I think it is a really fresh story. I think it's a really cool creature design. There
Yeah.
is the only downfall I think that Pumpkinhead has is it's called Pumpkinhead. I think if
Yes.
it wasn't called Pumpkinhead, maybe people would take it a lot more seriously. I don't know. But
I
you know,
think you're right. And we got horrible sequels. Like, if we're talking about franchises, this has to be one of the worst. We got one of
yeah.
the best movies at first, and then after that, it went way
Well, this is
downhill.
your time to make the case for Pumpkinhead. People
Yeah.
need to know, Brian. It's a great movie.
All I'm saying is rewatch it. I think it holds up today. The scene where Pumpkinhead crawls through the church is by
Very
far one of the
cool.
scariest things to me when I
Yeah.
was a kid. And like I said,
I couldn't watch this movie when I was a kid. It did scare me. It was
no.
too freaky. And again, that fleshy look is so gross.
And like, yeah, his teeth and his face, the
like
elongated
yeah, the
face.
stretched
Yeah.
out head. And
Oh.
this was the other thing. I still have to fact check this since we talked last, but I could have
Mhm.
sworn that Pumpkinhead, the design was originally a design that he had created for the Predator.
So I think I didn't fact check it, but I know the look of the first Predator. I've seen it, and there is absolutely 100%
some similarity there.
Similarity to both creatures, and he definitely took what was rejected from Predator, tied it into Pumpkinhead, and made an amazing creature. Because
and
honestly,
as like an artist, like you can't let go of some of these ideas sometimes. And maybe this was his passion project. He's like, no, this was a cool design. You guys didn't like it for this project, understandable.
And just like the kid in the movie, he was like the kid from Jerry Maguire. You couldn't help but love this adorable little boy, you know? And yeah, sure, he gets hit by a dirt bike and he dies. It's a little unbelievable, but whatever, you know? I can't stick up for this movie enough. I love it. It's my number one, and one of my first 4 horror movies I've ever seen in my life, and it stuck with me.
So cool. I just think it's awesome that Pumpkinhead's your favorite movie. Like unabashedly, like this is my favorite horror film, and
it is, and
you just aren't on my level, and that's cool. Like I love that, because I feel like a lot of people pick this isn't I shouldn't say this too harshly, but some people I think pick their favorite films because that is their favorite film of the favorite films they're allowed to have. And I love that Pumpkinhead's never one of those ones that you hear. So I think that's fantastic. I believe you.
I'll spread the word.
Say that.
I'll spread the word of Pumpkinhead till the day I die.
Preach.
Yep.
So that leads me into my favorite.
Here we go. Yep.
Aliens.
That's all right.
Aliens is one of my favorite films of all time. Also, just like The Thing. I just love Ripley so much, and it's my favorite in the franchise. Again, we're talking amazing special effects. I don't need to stay on this film too much because I talk about it so much. Aliens,
right. I hear you.
Ripley, James Cameron. I mean, without Sigourney Weaver, this film would never have happened.
No.
It's just, I love it.
I don't blame you. I am not as a hardcore fan in Aliens as I am of Alien.
Right.
But I cannot go against anyone who loves this movie because it's just an action version of one of my favorite horror movies. And
fair.
But also horror. It's where Alien was horror sci-fi. Aliens is horror action to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Aliens fits more in line with the likes of Predator and Terminator as far as horror action goes. There's definitely a lot more guns, a lot more pow going on. I mean, you have space marines.
Yeah. Right.
That totally checks out. I think the only reason I prefer it to Alien is because of her storyline as a character. I adore her so much. I feel like she's such a great protagonist, and in Aliens, she really comes into her own as a leader. Whereas in the first film, she was the reluctant leader by circumstance. In the second one, it's by choice. She chooses to go back because they don't believe her. And I love that. Like in the face of evil, she's like, well, been there and done that. Let's do it again.
I will always say, and I always swear to it, you can give me a topic, best final girls ever. Ripley won't be on it because she has ascended the final girl list. She's not on the level of any other final girl. She is too badass. She is godlike in final girl world.
I think the 80s gave us some of the greatest icons of horror. Two of the best protagonists being Ash and Ripley. You don't get better than that. And I would even say McGrady from The Thing is also iconic. Still not nowhere near as Ash and Sarah Connor.
I mean, we have,
I didn't even have Terminator on my list. How is that possible? Terminator 2 is like one of my favorite movies.
It's tough. Terminator 1 really borderlines horror. So
I think it's pretty horrifying.
It is pretty horrifying. Terminator 2 is totally an action movie with some scary sequences. So I thought about it.
Scarier.
Yeah, I know, but I thought about it. I'm like, we got Alien. That's good enough for me.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I'm going to say Terminator 2 is fantastic and
one of the best sequels ever.
Iconic,
yes, absolutely.
One of the best sequels. Aliens and Terminator 2, totally.
How do you talk about the 80s without the Lost Boys?
The thing is the 80s without that sax scene.
Without that saxophone scene, and I can't remember his name right now because I can only remember the song Cry Little Sister, which is my most played song in my car when I'm going for coffee in the morning.
Absolutely. I
But
think I've used the soundtrack to The Lost Boys for like many a content. Like,
yes, it
it's not even
just
the only good
fits.
song. It has the best People Are Strange rendition, like
Yep.
ever.
It really does. The soundtrack was ahead of its time, and vampires were cool, even though you had to root against them. And
Right.
Michael was one of the most torn characters that you could really love, you know?
God, and boy, wasn't he good looking. Jason Patrick, man, what happened, man?
Sexy ass man he was. He really was. Like,
So good looking.
I have to admit, if I wanted to look like somebody in the 80s, it would be him. I think so.
And star Jamie Gert, gorgeous. Like,
Yes.
stop. The whole cast was beautiful. Kiefer Sutherland never looked better.
And with that bleach blonde mullet, anyone could never pull that off but Kiefer Sutherland.
I loved the costume design of this film. Like, it was so like glam rock, punk rock. Like, it literally was every rock blended into like a costume.
Right.
Like, these vampires just were like, we love all rock.
Yeah. They took it's like they went to, like you said, just every rock show, blended it all together and threw it into the costume.
Yeah.
And that part of it, the look of the vampires, the personality of the vampires, and the brutality of the vampires, really,
the campfire scene.
I was gonna say the campfire scene is my best scene in the movie, and it shows what they're capable of. But they're so suave and cool, and they're
up until that point they're just cool, and then they're like terrifying.
And then they're terrifying, and they live on the edge. And the dirt bike scene with the bridge, and this was just everything I wanted to be when I grew up. You know?
Yes. Yeah. Like,
I don't know how to explain it. Yeah.
It managed to make, like, you know, they talk about like you got to watch who your friends are, you're guilty by association. You know, there's the bad kids and the good kids. And that was kind of the theme of this movie. And then you have this like this taboo, like bad boy aesthetic is so cool. And you're like, at the same time, like as a viewer, you're like, damn, these vampires are so cool. And like, they're so sexy. And then you're like, holy cow, like the dude was just like wiggling an arm and throwing his bodies into this fire pit. And it's like, they're monsters.
And then they go in the cave. The Frog Brothers go in the cave to kill them. And we really see them like, and that's when they get scary. And you're like, oh shit, okay, these people are not to be messed with. But not only that, the angelic music, I think, is a big staple for me.
Yeah, it's so LA.
Yeah, like, it's like, I don't even know the lyrics, but
it's so good. Yeah, it's so good. And I think that The Lost Boys landed on my top 13 for both costume design and soundtrack, just because they're iconic, both of them.
Yeah.
There is like a remake coming. I'm very curious how they're gonna do this, like modern aesthetic.
A lot of kids from It gonna be in it, or at least two of them, I think. And
which gives me some faith, because I think that those child actors are just so great.
Absolutely. And if they can pull a couple people from Stranger Things, I think they might have a cast that we can work with. Yeah.
Yeah, I have high hopes for it. I'm really curious to see what direction they go with this, because they can't half-ass it. They really have to lean in and be super ridiculous.
Let me tell you what, right? The dude with the saxophone was so confident in his ability in that movie. Didn't even matter. It was cool. It was cool. It was so cool. If these people can commit to it, they could totally sell the movie. They have
to commit. Yeah. That's why these things are so great today.
It is. Yeah. The Lost Boys is something that holds up today for most people, and new viewers that see it agree. So unlike a lot of other remakes, there's not a lot to improve on, and you have to be creative in order to improve on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think The Lost Boys is going to be a tough remake. I'm excited to see them do it, and I hope that it's great, because I think it's a great film to reintroduce to a new generation. So I am excited about it. But yeah, it's going to be tough. They really got to lean in. They really got to go for it.
Yeah.
It's a classic. It's a fantastic film.
It's
on everybody's top.
If there's something, absolutely. And if there's something that needs to be remade and remade right, it's going to generate a lot of hype, at least. So
it will. Next film I wanted to talk about would be David Croninberg's The Fly.
Yeah.
1986. This movie is like,
I'll tell you what, it's heart-wrenching. touching, it's emotional, and if I were attracted to men, Jeff Goldblum would be the man I would be attracted to in
Is
this
there
movie.
a more beautiful couple than Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis? And
I don't
from my
think so.
understanding, they were actually together while filming this. So the chemistry is just unmatched.
Off
They're
the charts.
so in love in this movie. I can sense it. It's why this film is so heartbreaking to me. Like, you know that they're in love.
See it. I didn't see it for the first time until a few years ago, and it held up completely. I didn't even feel like I was watching a movie from the 80s. It really was that good. Yeah.
Minus the fact that it's that classic slimy 80s fleshy
right. Yeah.
effects.
I know, the fleshy Pumpkinhead practical effects, apparently. Yeah. But no, with the time travel, and this is one of the earlier body horror films that I don't usually get into body horror.
Me neither. It's my least favorite genre.
I think I'd agree too. And there's maybe two movies off the top of my head, Starry Eyes and The Fly, that I can think of for body horror that I like. But Jeff Goldblum really, and Gina Davis, sold this movie through and through.
Yeah, absolutely. I typically really do not like body horror, especially when there's this like really aware, you're fully aware of what's happening, transformation that you cannot come back from. And the one thing about The Fly that doesn't ruin it for me is he's actually losing his mind with his body. And that's like an important detail for my brain to be able to handle what I'm watching. Because if they're fully aware with what's happening to them and there's nothing they can do about it, they can't go back. It just really like screws me up. Like I just can't.
I understand. The mind has to break, or otherwise the actions don't make sense to me in a body horror. You know what I mean?
If I'm aware, like that's horrifying. I would rather die.
That's what makes Jeff Goldblum such a great character in this movie, is that you can't really root against him because he's losing his mind and his body.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And the love for Gina Davis comes through so well that it's so hard to, and that's why it's so heart-wrenching at the end.
It is. And she's trying to stand by him the whole time and help him and save him as he's making it worse. Every decision he's making is just getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And it's another perfect movie. I find this film to be heartbreaking, scary, one of the best body horrors, another starring practical effects. Croninberg really managed to make us scared, and the ending is so dire.
Oh my god, that split up in the time machine, that killed me.
And her being pregnant.
Yeah, I know, I almost forgot about that part. Like, imagine, I don't know, I guess that's more a woman thing, because like I can only imagine what it would be like am I pregnant with a fly right now? You know what I mean? So I can't imagine what it would be like from a female perspective, but damn.
That's like, it's just another added layer to the body horror in my opinion. And phenomenal acting. We have phenomenal directing, great story, some of the best chemistry I've ever seen on TV ever. So,
Return of the Living Dead is one I had on my list, and I guess you could call it a little bit of body horror because of everything that happens to the characters in the movie. This was a zombie movie different from zombie movies I've seen before. I guess it mixed comedy, special effects, and scariness together, in my opinion, in a great combination.
It was funny.
It's just really outlandish. They really dug into the tropes of zombies, like brains.
And the 80s like punk scene.
In the 80s punk scene, we have Linnea Quigley on the gravesite. I mean, that scene alone. She
was such an edgelord.
Teenage me watching Return of the Living Dead was a thing to behold. I was like, whoa, they can show this in movies? And the zombies were cool. The special effects, the word I would use to describe this movie, right, is just cool. Like really so cool. Yeah.
It's so cool. It's, again, that 80s punk aesthetic is so fun. I think a lot of people cling to that in film, and it becomes its own campy kind of cult following just for that alone, that aesthetic alone. Think of things like Hackers. Like, that's not a good movie. We love it because of the aesthetic of it and how cool the characters were. Like, in spite of it being ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, looking back on it.
And seeing Trash slash Linnea Quigley
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, I just want to be ripped apart by old men eating my flesh." I'm like, what in the fuck is going on right now? But at the same
So
time, I'm very
ridiculous.
intrigued.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of like I love it because it's that edgelord trope of like, I'm so edgy, and it's
Yeah.
very, it's almost like the precursor for the emo look, like the idea of the emo, like, I'm so sad, my life is so
Yeah.
sad.
Oh,
There's
I'm
the punk,
so,
like, I'm
yeah.
so edgy, nothing, I love scary blood, razor blades, safety
Right.
pins in my nose. Like,
Yeah.
you know?
Even the leader of the gang is like, what the fuck is wrong with you right now? You know, when
Yeah,
she's
like,
all in heat and everything.
she's
I
trying
don't
to
know.
like shock, right?
Yeah.
She's gotta shock
And then
them.
she turns into a naked redhead vampire at the end, and it was just, I mean, a zombie at the end, and it was a wild movie. I remember when I first saw it, I was like, whoa, this is so amazing.
I love it when horror and like adult themes really collide in like a really
Yeah.
taboo way. I love that because they're so adjacent. Like you never see a lot of horror without some sort of sexploitation going on in it, and
No.
it's become
And-
very synonymous with the genre.
And let's be honest, Linnea Quigley was at the forefront of that sexploitation
Yeah.
in a lot of 80s movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, when it comes to zombie movies in the 80s, Return of the Living Dead really kind of brought a new style to it. That's why I have it on my list, because I'm very appreciative of what it did for the genre.
Really like
Yeah.
leaned in.
Brought it home, like
That
spiked the
seems to be
ball.
like, yeah, it seems to be the theme of the 80s where they're like, I have an idea and I'm really going in. Speaking of sex and horror, I have to talk about Hellraiser, which again,
Yes.
1987, the year I was
So,
born. Just throwing it out there.
I watched, let me just say, Pumpkinhead 2 Blood Wings. Andrew Robinson, he was the father in Hellraiser, yes?
Yeah, Larry Cox. Yeah.
Yes. Every time I see this guy, all I can think of is like sexual deviance. But Hellraiser.
Poor Andrew.
I couldn't help it. He's playing this good-mannered sheriff in Blood Wings 2. I mean, Pumpkinhead 2. And all I can think of is him being a fucking weird sex fiend in Hellraiser. I don't know.
You're not gonna get out of that role or that image in our minds. Sorry,
No,
man.
which is okay because Hellraiser is an amazing horror movie, you know?
It's so good.
Yeah.
We have like, again, I think one of the better final girls of all time, of all the slashers. Kirsty was great, and I don't think she's talked about
Yes.
enough how cool she is, because she's
No.
so cool. When you're first introduced to her, she's very much her own person. She's
Yeah.
very outspoken. She's very much she has her mind straight, like she knows what she can and cannot
Yeah,
say.
she's
or
not this
how to be in a room.
partying teen, smoking weed, drinking beers in the at
Right.
a party. You know what I mean? She's really got her head straight. Yeah.
And then she, of course, is introduced to these Cenobites. And you would think like, oh my God, I'm going to run, I'm going to fight, I'm going to do whatever I can. She makes a deal with them.
Yeah.
Like, how freaking smart. Like, you have this piece of shit man who's like clearly not a good guy, and she knows is up to no good. And she's like, I'm going to give you him because he clearly escaped and he's causing my life a lot of problems right now.
Fuck him. That's
Let me
why.
get him for you.
Yeah.
Aren't you guys feeling like a little stupid? Like, I can get him for you, and you could just call this a wash.
Yeah.
You don't know me.
She was smart. Smart in a decade filled with non-smart final girls.
Right. And I mean, how quick thinking, like,
Yeah.
in the face of Pinhead.
I would literally shit myself in front of the Cenobites. I would crumble. I'd be like, all right,
I don't
show
know
me
how
your
I would
ways.
feel. Like, I don't
Can-
even know. I couldn't even comprehend.
Can you
Like-
show me the sites you have to show me?
Yeah.
That's what I would be like. Okay, show me.
What is this?
Yeah.
What are you
tell
going to
me.
show me? Because I can't
Yep.
tell. Am I going to get tortured, or are we going to have sex? Like,
Yeah,
what is
it
happening? I'm
It
getting
was
really-
confusing for me. And let me just say, when I was younger, this is the only horror movie I would walk away from when people were watching it. Nightmare on Elm Street 2, I snuck into my aunt and my mom's room, watched it.
Awesome.
Pumpkinhead, snuck my buddy's VHS and watched it. Hellraiser, anytime that thing came on, I would walk out of the room. I don't know why. I just knew it wasn't for me.
Well, it was right up my alley.
Oh, it
I'm a
was right up my
fan
alley
now.
13, 14, 15 when I hit puberty. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You're right. No, I don't think I saw it until I was like a teenager. I
Yeah.
don't think I saw it. It wasn't like the other ones. I want to say this one was actually pretty well shielded from me. And that makes sense. It has
Yes.
very
Yeah.
sexual undertones. So obviously,
Mhm.
and honestly, I don't think it made sense to me the first time I saw it. I did
I
not
think that
catch any of that stuff.
I think that was the problem when I watched it younger. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. Like Frank was the brother, right? Was it Frank?
Frank was her like ex, right? The one
Yeah,
that
yeah, like
escaped.
the really twisted dude at the beginning of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I remember, I'm like, why does he want paint so much? What's going on here? And now, when older, I'm looking at it like, oh, I get it. I've
Yeah.
seen things. I know it. You know.
It's seen things.
Yeah, but back then, I'm like, I don't know why
Yeah.
everyone wants so much blood and pain. I don't want this. I want to get out of
I
here.
feel like this film was a little bit ahead of its time. I'm
Definitely.
so surprised at how like beloved it was, because to me, this is something that like the horror genre has gotten kind of a lot of shit for over the years, is having
Yeah.
that like having sex involved in any capacity was something that got people killed. And in this one, it's like literally the main theme is sadomasochism, which wow, like
Right.
how did a major film cover sadomasochism in the 80s when like I feel like just now it's becoming mainstream
It
discussion.
really, yeah, exactly. Not even mainstream, but just accepted at this point, you know?
Right.
Yeah, like we're on that way to mainstream, but they really
it feels
push the
mainstream
limit.
when I get on TikTok. I don't know what your TikTok looks like.
No,
but...
you're absolutely right. It is, but it's crazy in the 80s how they got away with it. Not only that, but actually got a mainstream horror movie out of it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Way ahead of its time. I think it also has some really cool practical effects. Again, the 80s, just peak
Yes.
practical effects era. Like
I have to watch 3, 4, and up because I've only seen 1 and 2.
And another one that's getting a reboot. I'm very excited about. I
Yeah.
cannot wait to see it. The actress who's going to be starring in it, she was in the show Sense8, and she was fantastic.
Jamie Clayton. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to see her take on the antagonist Pinhead role, what that like design is going to look like, how we're going to see sadomasochism on film in a horror film today, again, with it being so much more accepted and like mainstream almost, that I'm really curious how it's going to play out and whether we're going to see more of a grayer area with our villain, if it's going to seem a little less villainy and a little more
they're going more
gray.
towards I haven't read the books myself, but they're edging more towards the book.
Right.
So it's really curious. And in a world like we live in today, I would like to see them dive head first into that subject matter. I don't know if they'll have the balls to do it.
What reason do they have to not?
It's true.
Hellraiser in the 80s really went for it. And you're telling me in a day and age where it's even more accepted, what reason do you have not to go full on?
You're right. And I'm hopeful for this new Hellraiser movie.
Me too. Another film from the 80s that really kind of leaned in again and came into its own later, much later in the franchise, would be the Child's Play franchise. And we have Child's Play in 1988. And this was the first horror film I ever saw. I was 4 years old. I didn't rewatch it again until probably 11 or 12 years old because it scared me so much. But this is a film that took a concept that seems so silly and made it happen. I mean, a murder serial killer doll possessed by a serial killer. Who through voodoo, ritual.
This always strikes a little piece of my heart because at a carnival when I was like 5 years old, my grandmother made me play a game and I won a Chucky doll, right? And she said I went and threw that Chucky doll out in the woods every night for like like a week straight.
Oh.
But one of my uncles, who was 6 years older than me, went and grabbed it every night and put it back in my room. So Chucky /
What?
Child's Play freaked me the fuck out when I was younger.
Your uncle is the man.
Oh, they're triplets. So it was each one of them. Yeah, I had 3 of them to deal with. Thank you very much.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a nightmare. Eventually made me love the series so much because, of course, I love being scared. But back then it was terrible.
I was terrified of it, but also like I appreciate so much how cool they made this character to be such a charismatic, like very much like Freddy Krueger. Again, this is probably the one that comes closest to similar as far as like that charismatic, goofy, but scary villain that like you're both afraid of, but you also laugh with. And I don't think that he really came into that until later. And again, I think that honestly, this film seemed a little ahead of its time with how brash it was.
It was. And Brad Dourif he needs to be given more credit in the horror community than he does. A lot of people don't realize that Brad Dourif, with only a voice, made a doll. Because let's think about other doll movies, right? The Boy, The Conjuring, Dead Silence is pretty good. Puppet Master, but we don't get a scene like when Chucky looks at the mother and he's like, "You fucking bitch, fuck it," and he starts freaking out.
Amazing.
It was a great scene. And Brad Dourif, I love him no matter what. I loved him in Rob Zombie's Halloween too, but as Chucky, he was masterful with voice work.
And the franchise is carrying on to this day. I mean, the Chucky series was so good, and it felt like a perfect blend of the really goofiness that you get with like Bride of Chucky and the original terrifying and like real scary moments that you got from the original Child's Play. Those moments of like almost POV of this doll where you're like you're jumping between the POV of the doll and then the POV of the person who doesn't realize that this doll is about to attack them, and the amount of tension that built was so scary. And the show really pulled that off again. I had a lot of moments watching that show where I was really scared like that again. I know it's coming.
They brought a lot of elements from old into the new, and they really balanced it well in the show. This is one to kick off for Sleepaway Camp, 1983.
Sleepaway Camp.
Oh my God. Let's just skip the rest of the movie because we've seen camp horror movies from Friday the 13th, The Burning. We've seen it, right? What makes this movie different is the ending. When I first watched this movie, the ending freaked me the fuck out.
Yes.
Because not only is it shocking, but it's like we see a female with a dick and a knife covered in blood going bah.
The face, that moment, terrifying. That imagery stays in my mind. I like freak myself out when I come across it, and I'm like on my phone scrolling through TikTok, just trying to go to sleep, just scrolling away, and I get that scene and I'm like, and not sleeping now.
I know it still holds up to this day. I can't think of a scene that's so turned on its head visually that you're just like, what in the hell is happening here? And believe it or not, I saw Sleepaway Camp 2 first. I didn't see Sleepaway Camp until after the second one. I knew Angela was a boy, and even still, the movie really shocked me.
Nailed it. Yeah. I don't find him being a boy or her being a boy being the shocking part as much as the facial expression and the sound. You're supposed to be shocked. That is shocking. That sound and that look is so shocking. And nothing really hit like that for me until The Grudge, or The Ring. And the look of The Grudge, the eyes under the bed, or they pull the sheet back and the eyes are there. It's something about the eyes being like, I don't know. It's scary.
And the best part is Felicia Rose at all the conventions does that face for all the pictures, and
oh my God,
it's amazing. She gets into that character every picture she does. She still does it. But you're right, it's a fact. The sound she's making and the way the head looks on the body, because you can tell they're using a boy's body but a girl's head, and it's just like melancholy. It's really weird.
I think that the face, that reveal, it's one of the better endings in horror. People talk about it to this day, and they mark it as one of the best reveals or twists in horror. Again, to me, the shock is the face more than the twist.
I remember I watched it on like a huge TV with a good sound system, and I was like, what the fuck is that going on?
Yeah, very scary.
Otherwise, like, to be honest, Sleepaway Camp is a really run-of-the-mill camp slasher. But the ending is what really separates it.
My last film from 1988 is one of the best horror comedies of all time. And to me, again, a fantastic soundtrack. It's a film that I put on in the background when I have like parties, and it's Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice.
Another Gina Davis movie. Alec Baldwin looking all baby faced and good looking.
Right? I know. It's crazy to think that's him.
And Catherine O'Hara, who is, Catherine O'Hara and Winona Ryder being, big favorites of Tim Burton. This film is like, to me, probably my favorite Tim Burton movie ever.
I think I would agree. If you put me on the spot and tell me what Tim Burton movie is your favorite movie right now, I think I'd name Beetlejuice. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I can't think of another one that I like more.
At all. I can think of some that are online with it, but not that I like more. And Michael Keaton is a huge part of that as well.
Agree. And I believe that this one is getting a sequel now, a very, very late sequel, but it sounds like Michael Keaton is on board to reprise his role as Beetlejuice. I think if I say it one more time, we'll just summon him. I would welcome him with open arms. I would happily throw on the red dress. I love Michael Keaton.
No, Tim Burton in all his glory. I debated putting this on my list, and I'm glad you did because I wanted to talk about it.
The dinner scene is one of my favorite scenes in horror, in like comedy horror. It is such a joy. Like, I feel like I watched this movie just for the Day-O dinner scene. It's all I want to see is Catherine O'Hara just dancing. It's so fun.
Well, to be fair, now that I've seen Schitt's Creek, I kind of wanted to be like, Beetlejuice, why don't you just calm down right now?
Oh my God, I love her in Schitt's Creek. Yeah, that show is so
amazing.
Fantastic.
When those claws reach up, the shrimp fingers, I remember those freaking me out like no tomorrow. Yeah,
me too. And like then the snake head, his face, and the snake head on the banister, that like look that he has with his eyes really bugged out.
Oh yeah.
I also love there's a very small scene that I think is so iconic that people probably think it's even longer, but the scene where they're in is the other world. I don't even know what it's called, but they're in the waiting room.
I think it's the underworld. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Purgatory. Yeah. I don't know what it's
something like that.
I literally just learned that the sandworms are on Mars, so
I think I heard that. I didn't believe it, but I did
no
hear
idea
it.
until literally a few days or a few weeks ago. Like, I had no clue. So anyways, when they're in the waiting room, the whole discussion that they have, and the beauty queen, the Argentine beauty queen who's behind the desk, she's like such an iconic character, and she's barely in that movie at all. But that's how good Tim Burton was with character design in this film and making things really pop with color and like just again really
because I remember her. I will remember her till the day I die.
People
because
dress up like her and cosplay her the most, besides Beetlejuice and Winona Ryder. I think that she's the most cosplayed from the film, and she's barely in it. Barely.
And that's, like you said, a testament to his character design and what what impact he can make in this film with such a short time.
Absolutely. It was such a well-designed production. It was such a well-designed characters.
Even the sculptures.
Wardrobe. The sculptures are so cool.
Like the art that Catherine O'Hara was into was so Tim Burton. Everything was just so Tim Burton in that movie.
Right. And the people who love that film are like right there with Delia. Like we all think Delia Dietz has the best taste.
Oh yeah. Right.
The best.
Yep. Absolutely. You're not wrong about that. I may have once or twice wished I was Delia Dietz. Just saying. I'm not a huge fan of her, but in Beetlejuice, she is a rock star.
It's funny. Like, I used to not really like Winona Ryder, but the more I think I get into horror and the more I go back and rewatch a lot of these films, the more I can appreciate her aesthetic and the way that she does things. I loved her in Stranger Things, and I'm so
Yes.
glad that
Yep.
we're getting like a Winona Ryder like reprisal or like
Like a resurgence. Yeah.
resurgence. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I loved Heathers. I love, Edward Scissorhands.
Girl
I mean,
Interrupted, I just watched the other day.
Girl Interrupted is so good.
Yep.
I feel like I respect her more now than I used to. I will say I find her distracting in Dracula, but that's okay.
Yeah, just a
Forgive
little
her
bit.
for that.
But you're
Buffy
right.
is such an
Stranger
amazing
Things, she
movie.
completely won me back. You
Beetlejuice.
can't talk about the 80s without talking about Beetlejuice. We talked about Ginger Snaps at the beginning of the movie, beginning of this episode, right? Is it just me, or do you see Tim Burton in Ginger Snaps anytime you watch it? Because with me, when I watched it, I got full Tim Burton vibes.
I do. And I think it's because the girls are so dark and morbid themselves that it definitely gives that vibe. Yeah, I could see that a lot, actually.
I don't know why.
And there is like a way that they film it kind of sideways sometimes that was very much like what Tim Burton would do with his more live action sets that were more of character studies.
I always
like was it Ed Wood, I think.
I think so. But I always describe his work as off kilter for the live action, like, very warped is what I say. And Ginger Snaps always reminds me of that. Yeah,
definitely. I can see it. It definitely has the aesthetic. I wonder if the director is a fan or something.
Had to be, because I watched it when I was older and I was like, these dudes definitely love Tim Burton.
Inspired.
Yeah.
Tim Burton is definitely a force in the genre. I think that I think some people debate whether he is a horror director, but I mean, you can't be morbid and spooky like him and not be included in the genre, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, he might not be on the level of horror as like Tobe Hooper or Rob Zombie, who does brutal backwoods shit, but there's levels of horror and he's definitely involved. I think we talked about a whole hell of a lot, and I think I talked about everything I had.
I think that this decade is one of the most impactful. I'm so glad we got to cover it. I'm sure we missed some of y'all's favorites out there. Please put it in the comments. Let us know what your favorites from the 80s are. What do you think are the most important of the decade?
Because there's some out there who's like, what about this? What about this?
How dare we?
Yeah,
I know.
Right?
These were our favorites. We'll be hitting the 90s next, and that'll be over on Fandom at Random's channel. And I can't wait. Thanks again for going down this memory lane with me. I really enjoy this series, and I can't wait for the next one.